And now as we go through the 21st century, as globalization matures, as globalism becomes more dominant, you're going to see a shift. Because right now we have the North and the West kind of up here and the East and the South down here. Well, globalization is going to mature and they're going to reach parity here. So this side has to decline and this side has to grow. So you're going to see the capital shift. And it's just the natural result of market forces after neoliberalism and the people that are trying to expand this capital engine have gained new territory. So with things like GATT, that opened up the capital machine to new regions of the world. And so just the natural math of the financial system requires now that the corporate system shift to this region and the capital shift to this region, because that's where the returns are. Return on capital, that's what drives this system. And so there's less return on capital that's possible up here. So this is going to shift. It's not conspiracy, it's simple math. And you're going to see a new form of top-down control in this region, because capitalism, the debt-based form of capitalism we've had, driven from banks as you're growing and it just increases debt. Well, that debt is a control mechanism over the population. Well, now that is declining, or at least reaching a steady state or potentially collapsing, you're going to need a different form of top-down control up here. I would suggest they've chosen the China model, as we see the same types of police that we've seen in China for a long time now. We see them in other regions of the world. It's the Darth Vader stormtrooper cops that come out in force and demonstrate that they're an army against the citizens at economic meetings. We've seen all those protests at WTO and G20 protests and things like that. They look exactly the same across all the, this whole region and this region. Straight out of the Star Wars series. I mean, they're big black uniform, big armor, big shoulder pads, big narcissistic images and helmets and billy clubs that look like lightsabers. So that's the system that we're seeing now being implemented. And I would suggest that that's akin to fascism. Now, some countries up here have been living in soft fascism for a while now, the corporate type fascism. But we're shifting now into a harsher form of fascism to maintain top-down control. And an alternative perspective on fascism is to view it as a restructuring process, taking a country through foreclosure. We saw in Germany, World War II was started because of the economic chaos and the debt situation Germany was in. Fertile ground for a dictator to stir up opposition and try to fight the powers that have it in debt. And then the Allied response to it, part of the priority was to collect for the creditors. We saw that in '97 with Clinton's Iraq Liberation Act too. One of the primary justifications for regime change and invasion of Iraq was collect for the creditors. Wars are always driven by economic issues. So that's an alternative way to view fascism, where Germany was foreclosed upon. It was restructured. They cleared out the debt and liabilities, restructured everything such that it was aligned with the capital machine so that it could grow with it through the latter half of the 20th century. You get glimpses of this in a movie like Schindler's List, where the primary narrative is the anti-Semitic, the Jewish narrative. And you see little scenes where cops or the Gestapo or whoever is taking suitcases of things from the prisoners. And they're dumping them in piles and taking everything of value, every piece of metal, every piece of jewelry, and accounting for them. You see them writing very detailed notes in ledgers. That's accounting. That's banking. That's a foreclosure process you see happening. They're clearing out the debt and the liabilities. And in that situation, they viewed humans as liability. And then recovering the assets, accounting for them, and reallocating them to the people that had claim on the assets. So I think you're going to see that sort of foreclosure process happen to clear out the debt that's in some of these countries. I mean, the countries have impossible levels of debt now. And as Michael Hudson says, debt that can't be paid won't be paid. True. But debt that won't be paid is going to be cleared out and collected upon by those who have power. So I think you're going to see fascism in the US, potentially other British colonies, because they've been used to the high-growth consumer-type system, and that's changing. They're going to clamp down on it now. And then by 2050, we're going to see the more equalized global system, And China will have emerged as the rising sun of Asia, the leader of the world, but it's all going to be controlled and managed by the central scientific capital machine, pumping blood equally through the overall body, the overall human civilization. So just one key insight is to view, communism, this form of capitalism, and fascism as three different types of top-down control over large populations, depending on how the capital machine wants to manage them. Are they in a high growth phase, or are they in steady state, or are they in a restructuring phase? But now it's not even appropriate to really see these as three separate systems. Today we see a melange of tyranny, if you will. Like in China, where you go to Shanghai, it looks like New York. It's a capitalist. There's a lot of capitalist activity, but there's fascist control system in place. And then if you go to the rural regions, it's more like communism. So we're seeing a more high-tech, more advanced version of top-down control now. And back to the frat boys I mentioned at the beginning in the corporate world, they think that they're elites and that they're doing good things for humanity or whatever, but they're just betas and gammas in Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, and we're seeing this Brave New World emerge now. So just like in second grade when those guys would get the gold star from the teacher and take it home to mommy for the pat on the back, they're doing the same thing now in the corporate world, where the paycheck is the constant reinforcement mechanism to say, yes, Johnny, you're doing a good job. And unfortunately, they don't know what they're doing, and they've helped build this system. So I hope this helps kind of make sense of where the world has been the last 50 years and where it's going in the next 50 years. If you listen to politicians that are just talking about their individual country and policies inside the country, then you know they don't have a clue what you're talking about. And the whole idea that a politician, voting a Democrat in or a Republican, or a Labor versus Tory or whatever, the idea that they're going to change things is part of the false framework that the country is in charge. Because those politicians can do nothing about this. And then same thing with economists. If you hear certain economic schools talking about just focused on the state, on the individual country that's in charge of the territory they live in, and that it's kind of like state versus business, and the state just needs to get out of the way and let the free market happen. That's just not consistent with the world we're living in, where this state is not a sovereign state. It is an administrative district of this global capital machine. And that justification for the state to get out of the way and let the free market take over has been co-opted and twisted by the capital machine. It's just been used to help justify breaking down the power of the country so that the capital machine can have more power. It's funny, some of the people that are all about free market theory will talk about how if the US government gets involved in markets, my gosh, that's communism and socialism. And then you'll hear them cheer a company like Walmart. Well, Walmart is a retail extension of China. It's resulted in China, a officially communist slash fascist government, owning a significant amount of the means of production of the American economy, or of at least the economy that the American consumers consume from. So yeah, if the U.S. government gets involved, that's communism. But if it results in a communist government owning your means of production, then that's free market. Some of this stuff is crazy, and you need to be able to think through this as you're listening to people talking to you about solutions. They're either ignorant of the global system and they can't understand it, or they're deliberately misleading. Either way, they're not worth listening to.